I now welcome President Emmanuel Macron to tell us why France believes we should educate every single girl. Thank you, Mr. President.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Thank you for your invitation and your warm words. Thank you, dear Justin, for your words, and dear Teresa for the coordination. I'd like to recognise the Minister of our friend, the Ministers, Director General of UNESCO, UNICEF, and all the friends gathered here today. I'd answer your question perhaps by saying that every person has their own individual history. I myself have one, as it turns out, which places me at the heart of the challenges that belong to you. I've been to many of the countries that are represented here, but if I'd grown up there, I wouldn't be here before you, and I owe a great deal to a person who taught me a great deal, who instilled in me the values I have, and didn't attend school herself. My grandmother came from a family which, at the risk of using a controversial term, was illiterate. Her mother and father didn't know how to read and write, and she had the crazy opportunity of being in a place where a teacher reached out his hand to her and showed her trust, and she was able to move forwards in life. He didn't give her something, he didn't give her a free pass, he gave her the opportunity enjoyed by other children in other families of being able to access on their own these opportunities. And I'm the fruit of that story. And it's a story which is awfully common for many. But true inequalities are born from the fact that in some countries these stories are possible and in others they're not possible. I believe a great deal in education for young girls, because if in that country, my country, there had been no girls' education, I wouldn't be here before you today to talk about this, to defend the rights of girls to education. The thing is, at the heart of education is access to all of transmission and emancipation. First of all, transmission of knowledge, of well-being, of rules, of course, because you need to have structure to operate, you need to have good judgment, and emancipation as well, because once you have that framework, you give each individual the possibility of conquering the world, of overturning it, of changing social categories, of transforming things in your way, of fulfilling your talent, whatever that is. And at the end of the day, that's what I believe profoundly in. Along with the Minister of National Education in France, that's what we're doing. We're trying to increase the general level of education for our children and promoting social justice. That, for me, is at the heart of education policies. So, transmitting knowledge and emancipating. And then investing in people and training. And also investing in the very conditions of social justice in a country, and more broadly, internationally. There's no justice without education. Or you simply sentence yourself to justice systems which prevent education. You need to have access to something which is going to give you true education. And that's why in France we've invested a great deal in both primary and infant levels of schooling, in knowledge, in languages, of course, and that's something we want to develop in the context of the Francophone world with everybody attending here. It's what we wanted to do in terms of reducing class sizes, in order to allow them to better learn to read, write and count. And finally, it's to build a school founded on trust and responsibility, mutual trust, mutual respect, to train free citizens. That's to say, train citizens who respect the principle of equality between women and men, respect others and will themselves combat all forms of discrimination, have access to knowledge, and are empowered. So on a daily basis, they can transform the world because we have given them those weapons to work with. And I'm profoundly convinced that we have to protect our youth today. Ensure secure apprenticeships and learning, because the transformation in education is something that we believe a great deal in for our country. And this same ambition is the ambition I believe in on the international level, with the same values and the same foundation. That's why a year ago I took the commitment to support the initiatives of Justin Trudeau, the president of the G7, the commitments he recalled just now. And I took, among and with those in the room, commitments to fund the Global Partnership for Education. And I recognise the fantastic team working here. And with President Macky Sall in Dakar, we transformed that political will by raising $2.5 billion. And we've multiplied that contribution by 10. Now, I think we can go further because the work being done by the partnership in connection with all of our partners, UNESCO, the OECD, all of the countries represented here by the International Organization for the Francophone World and others, is to work together to focus on this mission. And in that light, I'd really like to personally thank Prime Minister Trudeau for having put girls' education at the heart of the G7 agenda this year. And the Charlevoix Declaration is extremely important. And I do look forward to carrying on with that work together and also working closely with Theresa, who is extremely committed to all of these values. And that's why it's a very great honour for me to be standing alongside several ministers from Niger, Kenya, Senegal, Malawi, to pursue that political motivation. But when you get down to brass tacks, how do you transfer that into reality? How do you specifically and concretely implement these things? First of all, very specifically, you have to build a solid and effective educational system which responds to the constant evolution of demography. 620 million children will need education in Africa by 2030, and a huge number of them 235 million in Africa, just on its own by 2030. So there's an enormous training program that needs to take place in terms of teachers, in terms of facilities and classrooms. But we also need quality education. That is, we need cultural and social standards, and this is particularly important for the education of young girls, which will allow each to be emancipated. Developing education doesn't just mean fostering education every day and explaining on a daily basis that women are not equals to men and so on and so forth. It's because we haven't stepped up to the mark and provided appropriate education that we are entrenching those traditional values instead of overturning them. And so we need to anchor and develop social and cultural norms which are in our hearts and explain the principles of emancipation, equality, the right to education, particularly for young girls. And in that connection, early marriages, child marriage, early pregnancies are some of the serious challenges we're confronting. And we let them continue to take root in many countries. And of course, the burden of domestic tasks often given to girls, the danger of the road to school, often a real problem in rural areas, are real obstacles in instilling education in young boys and girls in a genuine way. And also I would propose to the countries that wish it to share a common vision and common projects to train teachers. We're going to build schools, we're going to instill common values in order to ensure that inequality doesn't take root, but we also have to train teachers. And that for me is at the heart of one of our educational challenges. That's that training for teachers. And I think we can go a lot further in terms of rolling out specific projects to do that. And so, as you see, I'm profoundly convinced that on the international level, this commitment we're making together is something which will solidly structure our plans. It's an investment. If we don't do it, then we will be preparing for catastrophes. 444 million African children have to be in school by 2030 who aren't. If we don't do anything, and if we don't do the training, others will take hold of the agenda. And there will be a crisis. And that's why we need investment. And that's reflected in the Global Population Fund. $21 million will be lost if we don't invest in the well-being and education of children now. That's the reality we're confronting. And so it even makes financial sense. It's the economically correct answer. If you leave all of the issues aside, and of course you don't do that because this is about equality. That's why I'm talking about training and education. And why do I believe in girls' education? It's because I believe in equality between men and women. That's at the heart of our universalism. And when I look at things as they are today, 63% of illiterate adults are women. And that's the reality. And so we try to explain it away, say it's about cultural relativism and so on and so forth. But when I'm confronted with a young girl who chose to be married at 12 and chose not to have free education, and having all of the choices before her, if you introduce a girl to me that made that choice freely, I say it's not true. When you explain to me that it is free choice to decide that all young girls in that situation today are making a free choice to have 7 or 8 children each, it's not true. And so at the heart of equality between men and women, at the moment we are allowing to take root a terrible, ghastly type of relativism that means that we want to put a fig leaf over it. We say, let's not look at what's really going on in reality on the ground. There are very profound inequalities here at the root of this, and I recognise the work that's being done in terms of collective values and their installation being done by the organisations I've mentioned earlier. I want to fight for young educated girls able to make their own choices, including in overcoming difficulties, who are empowered to choose their own sexuality, who are trained in order to be able to choose how to use their bodies. And I profoundly believe that education is the route to women's access to the labour markets and to society, because these are choices that they will then have made and been empowered to make. And I think through girls' education we will have a better balanced and more dignified society. It's the only path to that. And finally, and I conclude on this, I think very profoundly that it's education investment, and particular girls' education investment, is twinned with health investment. Health of mothers, health of young women is vital. And I know this myself. That's why France is going to be hosting the Global Fund's work on AIDS, tuberculosis and malaria. And I know that we can move down this road together. For me, education and health are tangible pillars of our political humanism, because it's the body and heart of an individual, and it's these two pillars of contemporary humanitarianism we must fund in. We must invest in education and health for everybody across the world. And what that means is to choose our future proactively. It's to decide not to suffer, not to leave the generations to come to chance. We want to give them opportunity, and that's why we are continuing to work hard on that. In the context of the French presidency of the G7, we'll be continuing to work hard on the commitments I mentioned this morning. And looking forwards, I was first of all saying that women's power isn't only a concept now, it's not just a theory, it's a reality. And then when I saw you, thought that you've had the opportunity to act yourself, and I thought of a very pretty quote from Saint-Exupéry in Land of Men. He says, if you kill education, you're killing Mozart. Behind each child, in each country, we are killing Mozart. Every time we don't let a girl, a child, have access to the best possible education to fulfill their talents, we are implicitly murdering Mozart, and I don't want that world. When I look to the future, of course, I'm not choosing it for you, but what we owe you is to give you the power to choose your own world, and the road to that lies through education, and particularly girls' education. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.